Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
I'm Jill, the host of The Nourished Child. Let me ask you something. Do you wonder if your child is getting all the nutrition they need? Or do you feel unsure about what's going on with your child and their eating? Feeding kids is hard. I've raised 4 of my own children, and as a pediatric dietitian who works with kids and families, I know the job of nourishing and nurturing our children is a big one, full of emotional swings, frustrations, and worries. That's why I created thenourishedchild.com, the ultimate parent resource for children's nutrition and feeding. There, you will find free articles, e-guides, and programs to help you better understand your child, food, your own feeding, and their eating. Check out The Nourished Child today. Head to thenourishedchild.com. And now for the show. Hey, it's your pediatric dietitian, Jill. Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast. I'm a solo gal today, no guests. I watch the news every morning, and this idea of talking about making America healthy again has been sitting on my brain, and I have decided to do an episode around how we can make America healthy for all kids and include sort of my wish list of the areas that I believe we need to focus more on and or completely overhaul in order to make America healthy for all children. So here we go. Thanks for joining me. If you're new here, welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast. I've been doing this show for, goodness gracious, I think I'm on my 9th year. So there's a lot of archives and back topics, but I think now more than ever, we're at a flexion point with what it means to be healthy, what it means to create environments where it is easy for children to be healthy, and the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again, is a sentiment that is in the forefront of our minds. It's all over the news. I don't want this to be a political episode, but I am riffing off of this sentiment. And believe me, I do love the sentiment. Of course, we all want to make America healthy again. But the how, or how we do this and the execution, is really where the change happens, right? We can have these big ideas, and I'm not innocent of that. I have big ideas too, but it's all in the execution. And if we can't execute on these ideas, they are just ideas. So what I have to say for those who are in charge of our government and promoting MAHA and wanting to make radical changes, I say, put your money where your mouth is. Prioritize and fund these things that I believe, my wish list, the items that I believe will make America healthy for all children. So the first area I want to focus on is nutrition education. So did you know that 1 in 3 Americans confess they were never taught about nutrition? Well, guess what? This trickles down to our kids, and it means our country is sorely undereducated when it comes to nutrition. In fact, we live in a world where if you have lost weight, you can disperse nutrition advice, and you can make money doing it too. If you were blessed with the genes of a quote unquote hot bod, you can be a fitness expert. Here's the truth about nutrition education. Knowing about nutrition and food helps all of us make better decisions about what we eat. Just like knowing about kids' nutrition, food for children, feeding children, their growth, their development, how they view the world, and how that influences their decisions, and how we help them develop good habits. When you know about all those things, you make better decisions about how you will raise your child. Another interesting piece around this whole nutrition education thing is that the doctor is the number one resource for nutrition information. But here's the thing. A 2021 medical school survey in the US and the United Kingdom found that most medical students receive only 11 hours of nutrition training. And guess what, folks? I doubt any of it was around childhood nutrition. So, related to all of this, when I think about nutrition education, I believe we need to address a couple of these areas for parents and for children to make America healthy for our kids. Number one, parent nutrition education. That is the entire reason why I created the Nourish Child website. That place houses over 400 articles around food and nutrition for children from birth all the way through adolescence. In my TEDx talk in 2017, I described a path forward to nutrition education for parents. When I was pregnant with my first child and my husband and I took Lamaze classes, which, if I remember correctly, were like 6 to 8 classes we had to show up for before the birth of our child. During those classes, we learned how to breathe through delivery. We learned what to expect when we went in to have our baby. We learned some of the early things we needed to know about breastfeeding and bottle feeding and changing diapers and all the things that would make us feel prepared, not only for being new parents, but for the process of bringing this child into the world. And that is when it struck me, literally 28 years ago. If we could have a nutrition education system for parents who are embarking on feeding their child, it could be a game changer. Literally, if we had nutrition education for parents for the first 3 years of a child's life, even better, the first 5 years, I think the health of our children would be dramatically different. Because in those first 5 years, 3 to 5 years, nutritional foundations of health are established. Food preferences are established. Health habits like sleep routines and physical movement, these habits are formed in those early years. So what is really interesting is that 1 in 3 Americans confess that they were never taught about nutrition. Again, I said that at the top of the show, but when you think about the ramifications on not only just our personal health, me as an adult, you as an adult, what we choose to eat, how we nourish our bodies, the after effects or the trickle down effects of not knowing how to do it for ourselves oftentimes means we're not really certain about how to do it for our kids. So, what does it mean to make America healthy for our kids again in terms of supporting parents and their education? We need a system, a process whereby parents can easily access nutrition information. Yes, websites like mine, but even more so, because the doctor is the first number one source of nutrition information for everyone, it is true for parents also. So we need dietitians in the pediatricians' offices. Pediatricians don't have time to talk about what formula you should feed your baby, what you should do if your toddler is a picky eater, what you should do in terms of nutrition and food if your child has ADHD or if your child is gaining weight. These are real concerns and they are real life challenges for families. They need a dietitian available to them at their fingertips, somebody who knows about nutrition, who has been educated about nutrition and food and feeding. And if a physician or a group of pediatricians cannot make a dietitian available in their office, they need to increase their referrals to registered dietitians so that families feel supported, feel knowledgeable, and feel confident in feeding and making food choices for their children. The second area has to do with cooking. 54% of Americans are not proficient at cooking. This is from a recent survey from the Lynn's Shop. So what does that mean? If mom and dad can't cook, what are they feeding their children? If mom and dad can't cook, who's teaching kids how to cook? You can start to see where the gaps are. So I recently did an interview with Dr. Debbie Kennedy about cooking and children. And we really focused on the mental health benefits for children when they learn how to cook. But there are other benefits, so many benefits in terms of social, emotional development, in terms of food choices. We know that kids who cook and learn how to cook make better food choices. So cooking classes need to be included in the curriculum for elementary and middle school students. So it needs to be included in the STEM and STEAM programming nationwide. Cooking is science. Cooking is creativity. Cooking is math. So it is an easy thing to incorporate into the curriculum, but we need the funding and we need a real movement to incorporate this into the core curriculum of our young students. When they have the ability to take cooking classes in the school setting, we are able to educate children about how food is made, where it comes from, how to keep it safe for consumption. We allow them to lean into their natural drive for autonomy, and this builds their self-esteem because they're building skills. So there's just a whole bunch of ramifications, positive ramifications for including cooking classes in the school setting. Related to the school setting is health education. So we know that kids and middle schoolers and teenagers receive health education. So they learn about their bodies. They learn a little bit about nutrition, but not much. We need to teach kids about their bodies, how their bodies function, rather than having this focus on their size or what they look like or the number on the scale. In fact, I would love for us to all stop checking BMI levels in schools. If you look at the research, primarily led by Dr. Chris Madsen, checking BMI or BMI report cards in schools has not made a difference at all. It has not reduced the incidence or prevalence of children carrying extra body fat, and it has really only stigmatized children further, which hurts their mental health and well-being. So I did interview Chris Madsen a long time ago on the podcast about her study that looked at BMI report cards in schools, in the schools of California, a certain section of California. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I also included some of that interview in my book, Kids Thrive at Every Size. But the bottom line is putting such a focus on a child's appearance or form really marginalizes them as human beings, but also puts at risk their emotional well-being. So we need to shift health education to teaching kids about their bodies, not just puberty, not just sex education, but more like this is how your heart functions. And this is how what you eat and how you move and how you sleep affects your heart functioning. We also need to include how food affects one's health. So there are positive aspects that food and nutrients have positive influences on overall health, but there are foods that also have negative influences on overall health. And we need to showcase the balance of those negative foods without causing shame and stigma. And then thirdly, in health education, we need to teach the lifestyle habits. There is a plethora of research around the physical benefits and the emotional benefits of lifestyle habits like sleep, like reducing screen time, like moving your body every day, like having good eating habits. These lifestyle habits sustain good health over time. And we need to be teaching kids about these habits. Yes, we need to role model them. Yes, we need to walk the talk, but we also need to have curriculum that introduces these topics to them and really shows them the path of healthy living. So let's talk about food. Obviously, a lot of attention is being placed on ultra-processed foods right now, and foods being sort of the solution to all of America's health problems. You know my stance on this. Food is just one ingredient. It's not the whole enchilada. I am a big believer. It's all the habits, a well-rounded whole child approach, including physical health and emotional well-being. But let's talk about food because it is out there in the media. I've done some podcast interviews here on ultra-processed foods. I have a few articles on the blog about this topic. But there are studies that are coming out that are saying, for example, I just recently did an interview with the Daily Globe and Mail out of Canada about this recent piece of research that came out that suggests 45% of calories consumed by preschoolers come from ultra-processed food. So one of the things is that these headlines, and I'm saying this because you're a consumer, you're probably getting bombarded with all these headlines. And one of the things I pride myself in is looking a little deeper at these research studies and really trying to suss out the validity of them. So if you're seeing the headlines about this study, they make you believe that preschoolers are carrying extra body fat because they eat too many calories from ultra-processed food. But that's not actually what that research showed. It showed an association. And as I pointed out to the journalist who interviewed me, an association is, okay, 45% of calories consumed by preschoolers come from ultra-processed food, and they associated this with a higher risk of becoming overweight or obese. But they could have associated it with a higher risk of having brown hair versus blonde hair. I mean, the association research has a lot of problems. Not criticizing the researchers, but just putting it out there. It has a lot of problems. The other problem with this study was that they did not identify which foods in the ultra-processed food category these kids were consuming. Were they consuming chips and candy, or were they consuming beans and soy milk? Because all four of those foods are considered ultra-processed food. And you can see, as a smart parent that I know you are, there's a great variety of nutritional composition in those foods. So the other point I want to make about this, seeing so much in the news and media around ultra-processed food, is we've been down this road before, folks. Remember back in the 90s, it was fat, and fat was the bad guy, and it was causing all these cardiovascular diseases. And so the food manufacturers got rid of fat. Remember the Snackwell's fat-free cookies? And they loaded up those food products with sugar instead. And more recently, sugar is the bad guy. And I would say that there's still quite a bit of bandwagon on sugar being the bad guy. But again, we're now saying, okay, well, we're not going to be harping on sugar anymore. We're going to harp on ultra-processed foods. Now, that being said, I am not saying that all ultra-processed foods are good for your kids, but I'm also not saying that all ultra-processed foods are bad for your kids. You really need to understand when people are talking about ultra-processed foods that they are talking about the processing, not the nutritional content. So there is a difference. I did talk and interviewed a leading NIH researcher on the topic of ultra-processed food and nutrient density, Julie Hess. That was episode number 196 if you want to roll back and listen to that episode. But the main point about this is that ultra-processed foods are not all equal. Get this. Soy milk, canned beans, like garbanzo beans and pinto beans, canned tuna, tofu. They are all ultra-processed foods, but they are also all nutrient-dense, healthy foods. These should not be compared to potato chips, candy, or soda. The other point about ultra-processed foods, they are popular because they are tasty and they are appealing, and they are consumed because they are affordable and accessible, and they really highlight the economic disparities of our country. And they also highlight the American drive for convenience. So my advice is read those labels, look at the ingredient list, look at the nutrient content, use your nutrient lens. I've talked about this with pouches, baby food pouches. If you look at the ingredients, they're not all created equal. The front of pack might say veggie blend, but when you turn it over, the first ingredient is applesauce. Okay? Another thing, veggie straws. They're primarily, if you look at the ingredient list, made of potatoes with some spinach powder to color the veggie straw green. So be an informed consumer. Know that ultra-processed foods are not all equal. Be selective, use your nutrient lens, use your brain, look at the back of the package and the nutritional content, and make your decisions from an informed place. Now, I like to call foods highly nutritious, decently nutritious, and minimally nutritious. If you've read Kids Thrive at Every Size, you see I reframe food in a different way to make it a little bit easier to make good decisions about food. Downgrade minimally nutritious foods. Those are the foods that don't have very many nutrients in them. They might be high calorie or low calorie, but they don't have many nutrients. Think about it. Soda has calories, but you're not going to find any nutrients there. Candy has calories, but you're not going to find any nutrients there. And yes, I acknowledge these foods taste great. I get my candy fix nearly every day myself, but it's really about the balance. And so how do you downgrade minimally nutritious foods? You add more fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are everywhere. They are accessible, and they may or may not be affordable, but they come in many different forms, allowing you to meet your budget. You can get frozen berries, frozen edamame, frozen avocado. I just learned about frozen avocado. You can use dried fruit like raisins, cherries, mango, and dehydrated fruit like strawberries. These foods will have a longer shelf life, so they're not going to go bad in 4 to 7 days. You can have them on your shelf for a while, and they contribute a serving of fruit. And then don't forget canned fruit and vegetables. For fruit, get the canned fruit in their own natural juices, like mandarin oranges, for example. I used to buy those all the time for my kids. They absolutely loved them. Applesauce, another example. If you buy canned vegetables and you're worried about the sodium content, rinse it. Rinse those vegetables under water and then prepare them. Heat them up. Okay, we're going to shift gears here away from ultra-processed foods, and we're going to talk about another way to make America healthy for all kids, and that is marketing, food marketing to kids. Did you know in the United Kingdom, Greece, Denmark, and Belgium, advertising to children is restricted? But get this, in Norway, Sweden, and the Canadian province of Quebec, advertising to children under the age of 12 is illegal. I think we need to follow suit. Currently, the way we handle food marketing to kids is on a voluntary basis. We ask companies to voluntarily police themselves in this area. And I don't think companies are doing a very good job of policing themselves. Children are uniquely vulnerable to food advertising and marketing. Their cognitive abilities, the way their brains think. I talk about this all the time with the families I work with. We cannot have expectations that our children are going to understand nuance. That really doesn't happen until middle school and beyond. So the cognitive abilities of young children in particular are that they cannot differentiate ads from regular information they're learning in school, from factual information. So we need to look at how food marketing is showing up on digital media like games, TV, movies and shows. And we also need to look at how we are marketing on front of packages with characters. That is what is drawing children to some of these foods that are less than healthy for them or minimally nutritious foods. And we need to address this. And unfortunately, I don't think the voluntary self-policing that's in place right now is working very well for our kids. We know that when kids are exposed to food marketing, it increases their preference for those advertised brands. And food marketing can have profound effects on a child's overall diet and health, specifically through increasing their consumption of any available snack food during and immediately after seeing a piece of advertising. When we look at a child's exposure to commercial television, we know that they consume more calories. Overall, they have a tendency for higher body mass index or more body fat on their bodies, and they're less likely to eat fruits and vegetables. So the effects are pretty profound. And I think if we're really talking about making America healthier for all kids, we need to get a handle on food marketing to children that targets children. So another area kind of related to schools, but more under the food category, I would place it, is this idea of farmers and accessing fresh local food from our farmers and supporting our farmers. Approximately 65% of almost 13,000 school food authorities report participation in farm-to-school activities. That's where farms partner up with schools and deliver fresh produce like fruits and vegetables, and the schools prepare those foods and serve them to the children for lunch or for breakfast. 77% of schools served local food in their child nutrition program meals in over 60,000 schools across the United States. This is an NPR report. So there is a great movement here to support farmers and to get fresh fruits and vegetables into our school system. We need more of this. More. We need to have more partnerships between schools and farms. We need to expand into preschools and daycares and get them hooked up with farms and produce and incorporating that into the foods that they are feeding children for meals. Also, related to food, I believe, and if you've worked with me or read any of my articles or been a listener of this podcast for a long time, I'm a big believer in food balance. I believe when kids eat a variety of foods, including lots of fruits and vegetables, and by the way, many families need to be working on this, getting more fruits and vegetables into their children's diets. But I believe when kids eat a variety of foods, many of the quote unquote ill effects of nutrient poor foods or minimally nutritious foods and toxins can be moderated. mitigated. It's all in the balance. So that being said, what I want to say about food additives like food dyes and heavy metals in food that children eat, we need to get a handle on this, I believe. Not because I don't think these things are safe, but because I know we don't know the cumulative effects of consuming foods that contain dyes and heavy metals. We don't have the data in children. Our recommendations around food dyes and heavy metals revolve around studies in adults, studies in rats, studies in mice. And it's super challenging to do these studies in kids. It really is. And so I understand that regulatory bodies are basing their recommendations on the best available evidence, but we just don't know what effects consuming foods with lots of food colors and dyes in them and heavy metals are going to have on the development, on the neurobehavior of children. So circling back to this whole idea of food balance, right? If you are reducing minimally nutritious foods and you are leaning into fruits and vegetables and more of the food groups like protein foods and whole grains and healthy fats that include omega-3 fatty acids, for instance, you have a really good shot at mitigating these potential negative effects of additives in your children's food and metals in your children's food. So I do think that we are at a stage where parents and consumers and the public are getting more and more concerned about this. And so I believe to make America healthy for all kids, we need to get a handle on our stance about food additives, food dyes, heavy metals, where we stand, not just for the general public, but where we stand when it comes to children. Let's talk about school nutrition. This is another area where I think we can make some improvements to make America healthier for all kids. Listen, I'm a huge proponent of school nutrition. My sister works in the school nutrition, school cafeteria. I've always been a big believer. I know it serves a lot of children who may not have a good, healthy meal otherwise. I hear a lot of parents saying school food is all junk. And I just want to say, it's not all junk, but it's not perfect either. We could do with more scratch cooking. And I wish there was a movement towards making food in the schools the day of for children. I wish we served children in school fewer packaged foods. And as I mentioned earlier, I wish we had more schools opting in to the farm to school movement. Now, that being said, there are government regulations that require certain amount of calories, certain amount of protein to be served to children at meal times. There are also regulations around the amount of sugar and sodium and fat that can be allowed in meals and in snacks. So it's not willy-nilly, let me make whatever I want to make. But by focusing just on these nutrient components, sometimes what happens is that foods that make the cut get included, but they're not a model of what a nutritious diet looks like. So honey buns for breakfast, I'm talking to you. Sugary cereal for breakfast, I'm talking to you. We can do better. We need stricter school food policy, particularly around packaged foods served at snacks and meal times. Now, I know things are moving in the right direction. Snacks, for example, to be able to be served in schools have gotten stricter and stricter, particularly around the amount of sugar and salt. But here's the thing. sometimes manufacturers who are making food for schools are reducing these nutrient elements. They're reducing sugar, they're reducing salt, but the packaging still looks the same. So it can be super confusing for kids and parents. Kids can come home and say, I had, for example, chocolate milk at school, and parents can get upset about that because they think chocolate milk, and rightfully so, regular chocolate milk has a good amount of sugar, and some parents don't want their kids having that. But what parents might not know is that chocolate milk in schools has been reformulated to have lower sugar and to have lower fat. But the packaging may look the same. And so it's really hard to discern how healthy certain things are. But my point is, the model of what a healthy diet looks like may not always be conveyed in the school system. And that's what troubles me the most. And that's where I think we can do a little bit better in that arena. So yeah, it's not all junk, but it's not perfect either. And if we could bring more farm produce and support farmers at the same time, it's a win-win. If we can get schools to have facilities that can prepare food, that's a win-win. Scratch cooking, awesome. Fresh food, awesome. And food that looks like a healthy diet when you put it all together on a plate. It looks like a nutritious meal, not a lot of packaging. That would be great too. Let's talk about the healthcare system. If we want to make America healthy for kids again, what needs to happen in healthcare? So this is sort of related to what I talked about at the top of the show. I mean, we have a sick care system. We're not prevention-minded in healthcare. We like to think we are, but nobody's really coming in healthy with no complaints and getting support and education and prevention as a rule, as a basic. Now, maybe some organizations are doing this better now, but in general, we have a sick care system. You come into healthcare because you have a problem, you're sick, or you have a chronic illness. I believe to make America healthy for kids, for all kids, we need to lean into prevention. More dietitians at the table. If we're going to talk about food and nutrition and for children feeding them, we need more dietitians at the table. Registered dietitians, people who have been trained, who are licensed, who are required to keep up on their education. Nutrition, food, is involved in health and it is involved in disease. And in children, we can help families by having more contact with them. We can prepare them. We can see what's happening in a family and help them reframe and redirect or revise some of the things that are going on inside the home to make the environment healthier for everyone. When we lean into prevention, we need to make it worthwhile for the healthcare providers who are there doing the work. So that means increasing salary bases for registered dietitians so more students want to come into the profession. We need to increase training opportunities for pediatric dietitians. Right now in our country, there are not many training opportunities. Again, this goes back to be careful who you get your childhood nutrition information from, because not everyone is trained in pediatric nutrition. Let's talk about physical activity. I'm almost to the end here. I've got 2 more topics I want to talk to you about. Opportunities for physical activity, particularly in schools. Opportunities for moderate to vigorous activity have been declining in schools for decades by about 15 minutes per day. And as a result, children's scores in physical fitness have also been declining. PE classes are underfunded and recess has been limited. So we need to restore PE in schools all the way up through high school, in my opinion. And what that might look like in high school is the addition of yoga and meditation in the classroom. Why? Because a 2023 study from researchers out of Norway and India showed that yoga enhance a student's awareness, helping them become more relaxed and aware of the need to unwind. These are skills to be learned: self-regulation, how to recognize when you're stressed, and how to take care of that stress. This study suggests that when teens participate in yoga and meditation, they are empowered to make healthier lifestyle choices. Pretty powerful. But we've pretty much said to teens, "I'll figure it out." We don't support them when it comes to physical activity. And now more and more, middle schools and down into elementary schools, they're removing opportunities for free movement and recess, and that can have ramifications down the road. So, in my opinion, we need to address access and opportunities for physical activities in the school system. We also need to look at our lived environments. For children who don't have access to sidewalks or greenways, parks, green spaces, they aren't moving as much as they need to. If you look at the research around that, we know that when you do have access to sidewalks, greenways, parks, green spaces, it means that you're more likely to move your body more. So this is another area where we can improve and help make America healthy for all kids. The last thing I want to talk about is childhood obesity. And, there's a lot of talk about that right now. And I think the hard thing about this topic is that children offer such an opportunity to all of us, especially me as a dietitian. If you're out there listening and you're another dietitian, you're a pediatrician, a nurse who works with children, there's so much opportunity, and I suspect you already know this, but there is so much opportunity to turn things around for children, particularly children who might be on a trajectory that, in terms of their growth and the amount of body fat that they carry, they're on a trajectory that may be leading down a path that is going to threaten their overall health down the road. We already know if you have a child who carries extra body fat, their emotional well-being is at risk and or may already be harmed or compromised. So we need to be, I don't want to say aggressive because that's not really the word, but we need to be more tuned in to children and their growth patterns and more willing to step in earlier to provide support to families to help them get into a place where habits and eating habits and patterns of movement and sleep and all of those health habits that I detail pretty deeply in Kids Thrive at Every Size get addressed without stigma, without harm. And I personally feel that the way to healthier kids is through promoting these daily lifestyle habits rather than weight loss, weight focused, or weight centric measurements. That we can really, because kids are growing and developing and changing so rapidly over the course of childhood, there's a lot of opportunity to make impact and positive impact while protecting the emotional well-being of children. The other thing I would say, and I'm seeing this myself, is that, again, pull in the dietitian. If you're a healthcare provider out there who is taking care of children who might be on that trajectory where their health may be becoming compromised, their body functioning might be compromised, pull in a dietitian. Get a referral to a dietitian. And if you're a dietitian listening, think about partnering up with a pediatric specialist in obesity medicine. That does not mean that you are promoting GLP-1s for kids. That does not mean that at all. It means that you can help support families with the lifestyle behaviors we know to be proven to improve physical functioning. We know that GLP-1s are increasingly prescribed to children, and we need qualified nutrition professionals to assist families. That doesn't mean that you're endorsing GLP-1s. What that means is you're helping families with the essential lifestyle behaviors that every single child on this planet needs to be participating in. And you need to help those families with fine-tuning those habits or cultivating those habits if they're not there, so that the whole family can have an environment where everyone in the family is able to participate in positive ways without stigma in all of these habits. So, in terms of making America healthy for all kids, we have a generous proportion of our children who are struggling with extra body fat. Of those children, some are free from medical conditions and some have medical conditions. All of them benefit from cultivating healthy lifestyle habits. And that, I believe, is the focus that we should be focused in as the first tier for all children. All right, that's my rant about how to make America healthy for all kids. Thank you for sticking with me on this one. I hope that you got something out of this, and please send me your comments. Let me know. I'll be sharing this on social media, so comment away. You might not agree with everything I've said, and that's okay. This is my wish list from working with families for over 34 years, and I'm not perfect, but this is what I see. This is the lens where I see we can make the greatest impact on health in America for all children. Thanks for listening, and be sure to give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.